Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Divorce Differently podcast. In today's episode, we're looking at another common divorce myth, the idea that if your situation is straightforward, you can get a quick divorce. Now, many couples think that if they both agree, if they don't have complicated finances, or simply because they want to move on as quickly as possible, the divorce process can be wrapped up in no time. And it's often referred to as a quickie divorce. This episode is part of our Debunking Divorce Myths with Gilson Gray series, where we take some of the most common assumptions about divorce and compare them with what actually happens in practice. So today we're going to explore where the idea of the quickie divorce comes from, and we're going to explain what the process actually looks like in England and Wales, even when both parties agree, and even when the case is relatively simple. My guest today is Linda Pope. Linda is a partner in the family law team at Gilson Gray, and she's a specialist advising clients in divorce, separation, and private law children matters. Based in the London office, she has extensive experience of handling high value financial claims with international, multi jurisdictional issues, family businesses, and trusts, as well as representing clients with limited assets where a novel solution is required. Linda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Chloe, for inviting me to join you.
So maybe we start by setting the record straight, because there actually is an established timeline in England and Wales. And even if you agree on everything, that timeline cannot be compressed. Could you talk us through that a little bit, please?
So, in April, so it's coming up to an anniversary, April 2022, the government introduced what's called the no fault divorce.
Yeah.
So with the no fault divorce, it is as it says, you don't need to cite a fault based reason to get a divorce. It's
Yeah.
simply that the relationship has broken down, and there is very limited circumstances in which you can contest the divorce, and it's
Yeah.
usually on jurisdiction. You say,
Yes.
for example, like you don't think the English courts are the right place for your divorce to be dealt with. Other
Yeah.
than that, you can't contest the divorce.
Yeah.
Um, the reason, I suppose, well, let me go back. There is no such thing as a quickie divorce. It wasn't before
Important to state up front.
2022
Yeah.
or now. There's no such thing as a quickie divorce. It's the same time limits for everybody, and there is a statutory time limit. So from the date you issue your divorce application, there is a mandatory 20-week period before you can apply for the second stage, which is the conditional order,
Hmm.
which in the old days was called decree nisi.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is a number of things. One, the court or the government wanted to give parties a period of reflection.
Yeah.
Because now you don't have to cite a fault-based fact and potentially go to court because someone's contesting it. They wanted the parties the opportunity to reflect on, do I actually want to dissolve my marriage, or is there another way?
Yeah.
Um, it's also a period for sorting out other aspects of your separation. So, dealing with the division of the finances, property division, dealing with the children, arrangements for the children. And I suppose in some ways it's to give, hopefully to give one party maybe time to catch up, because
Yes.
if one issues and the other wasn't expecting it or thought maybe they could work through their problems, hopefully it'll give them a bit of time in which to come to terms with the breakdown of the permanent breakdown of their relationship. So once the conditional order has been pronounced, you still have to wait a further 6 weeks and 1 day
Yeah.
before you can apply for the final order, which under the old procedure was the decree absolute, and that's
Hmm.
when the marriage or civil partnership is formally dissolved. So start to finish, it takes about 26 weeks, the minimum
Yeah.
26 weeks. It can take a bit longer, but it's a minimum of 26 weeks to get divorced.
Yeah. And it's really 26 weeks if you do everything on the day that you can to progress. There can be other delays because not everybody applies right away for the next decree.
Yes, I mean, some people delay with applying for the conditional order. Um, Then also taking into account the court. I mean, there's hundreds, thousands of other couples getting divorced or separated, or the court has to deal with other things. So it's about judicial time for a judge to
Yes.
review your application and say you are entitled to a divorce.
Mhm.
But also, I think the main thing that can sometimes delay or stretch out that 26 weeks is if the parties don't agree on division of matrimonial assets or sometimes arrangements for children.
Yeah.
If there's ongoing proceedings in relation to those specific issues within dissolving a marriage or civil partnership, that will stretch out the time it takes to get divorced.
Yes, and I think that's an important matter to highlight is, and I think a lot of people don't appreciate that. There's really kind of three streams. There's the divorce itself, the dissolution of the marriage, but then there's also settling the finances and potentially coming to arrangements with the children. And they're all somehow interlinked yet independent. Could you explain a
Yes,
little bit how they
yes.
interact?
Yes, so I always explain it to a client that if you have a cake and you're cutting the cake into three, maybe four big slices.
Yeah,
So one slice is dissolving the relationship, so you are
yeah,
no longer spouses. Then the next part is resolving the financial matters.
yeah,
Um, and it's always how long is a piece of string. Some couple may have agreed how they're going to dissolve or separate their finances, any property, and that's fairly simple sometimes, but
yeah,
sometimes it's not. And I'd say probably not sometimes, often than not, because one party may have unrealistic expectations. One party may say, well, that's what you're getting, and they
yeah,
think, well, actually, that doesn't meet my need. Or another party may just be unreasonable or is slowing down
yeah,
the process. Then the other aspect is, and I was talking to a client about it last week. She said to me, "Oh, what orders will the court make regarding the children?"
yeah.
And I said that's changed as well because
Mhm,
when I started doing family work, you had to file a statement of arrangements for the children,
mhm.
and that told the judge what arrangements were being made for the children post separation. That's now gone.
Yeah,
And they take the view now that unless there's a dispute regarding the arrangements for the children post separation, they're not going to get involved.
yeah,
And sometimes a couple can't decide, from parents being with their children, every day, what the arrangements will be
mhm.
post separation. I mean, there's this view that children will naturally live with their mothers,
Yeah,
and
that's
I
all
and I
another
do
myth out there.
that is a myth. That is a
Yeah,
myth. It may be that mum is not the best person to be the primary carer of the children. Also depends how you set up your arrangements. It could be that
mhm.
dad was a house husband, so
Yeah,
he was the primary carer. Or there's other issues. It may be that they want a joint, what they call joint lives with or shared custody.
yeah,
Um, and one party may say no. And really, it's for the court to decide whether the children should have a primary home and how much time they spend with the non-resident parent, or whether there should be a joint arrangement. So it's coming to those arrangements. And then another thing with children is sometimes with a divorce, you may get, and typically it might be maybe the wife who decides,
yeah,
well, I want to go back to live nearer to my family.
mhm.
um, and so that might be in a different part of England or Wales, or it might be in a different country.
Yeah,
And dad may say, no, because that will affect my contact with the children.
mhm.
And so it may be that that has to be resolved first,
Yeah.
before obviously the divorce can be concluded.
So actually getting divorced in of itself, at a minimum takes 26 weeks. But what usually causes delays in the cases we see in the media and in movies, where they're divorcing over 4 or 5 years, it's not the actual divorce that's taking that long. It's agreeing on finances and or children.
Yes, yeah, because once they've settled matters in relation division of assets and the children, the divorce can be within days. The
Yeah,
final order can come through within days. So yes, so that is what takes that's why some couples take years to get divorced,
yeah,
because they are there's disputes over not dissolving the marriage, it's
yeah.
about other things.
And I feel like there's also another misconception out there with people who have been separated before divorcing, and feel like, well, we've already de facto, or they feel like they've been divorced already because the status quo has changed. They've probably come up to some form of arrangement regarding finances, regarding the children if they have, and then they think, oh well, now it's just about putting that on paper and fast tracking the divorce process. Uh, can we address that myth as well?
Yeah, there's no fast track divorce. And you know
Yeah.
what? I was thinking about this over the weekend. I think it's the media who's at fault for perpetrating
Making this
this.
idea, yeah,
Yeah. It doesn't matter whether you've been separated for 6 months, 6 years, 26 years, the process is still the same. Someone
yeah,
has to issue an application, although you can do a joint application now under the
yes,
new rules to divorce. And it's the same application is issued. You still have to wait 20 weeks before you can apply for the conditional order. And then you apply for the final order 6 weeks and 1 day. If when they separated, they entered into something like a separation agreement, and that's and the parties still agree that's what they want to keep to in terms of those terms, then they can have a financial consent order, which means it's legally binding,
hmm,
drawn up as soon as the application's been issued. And then once the conditional order has been made, they submit what was the separation agreement into a consent order to the judge. It all becomes legally binding, and whatever they agreed 6 years before, 26 years before,
yeah.
is the final order in their divorce.
So it does go faster if you've already agreed things. So in that sense, being separated might help, but also
Yes.
applying for divorce might put everything back into the spinner and reopen those negotiations. And in that sense, there's no more fast tracking of any sort.
Yeah, that's true, because as I was as any lawyer will say, is that it depends on your needs at the time.
Yeah,
So it could be that 6 years before you were all fine, everybody was working, and you were supporting yourself financially, and you were independent of your spouse.
yeah,
But it could be 6 years later, you may have
yeah,
developed an illness or something else has happened, and those terms don't reflect your needs now. So
yeah,
that could open up further contested negotiations, because
yeah.
someone will say, but we agreed this, I gave her this or gave him that at the time, and now they're coming back for another bite of the cherry.
Hmm. And I don't know if you see this, but I think there's a lot of different elements that feed into how quickly people manage to resolve matters. But one of the ones that I think is the biggest cause for delays is when people don't engage in the process in some shape or other. So when one of the two
Yes.
is refusing to disclose, or they just refuse to have any conversation at all,
Yeah.
that's where the delays are. It's not necessarily linked to the complexity of the case or how many assets there are to split. It has more to do with people's mindset and attitude through the process.
Yeah, if I had a pound for every time I said that, you know what, this is a straightforward divorce, even though there
Yeah,
may be complex assets or assets overseas, but it's actually the individuals who are making
yeah,
it difficult. And this kind of goes back to sometimes one person may have not caught up um, emotionally or
yeah,
mentally with the fact that the marriage has broken down. So for that reason, they are delaying things.
yeah,
Um, Domestic abuse is a
yeah,
reason as to why a divorce could be delayed, and it could be one spouse's way of continuing the abuse
Yeah,
if they
that's true.
delay matters. And we see, I've seen this a lot. They won't comply with disclosure requests. Another big thing is they won't get legal advice, and
Yes.
so they just do what they want. And that causes
Yeah.
delay and
Yeah.
increased cost for the other party who is legally represented.
Yeah.
Um, um, then, of course, I was talking about the emotional trauma,
Hmm.
um, and yeah, not engaging. So it could be that they refuse to go to mediation,
Yeah.
um, or even if you start court proceedings and with all the delays in the court, and something that the judges recommend a lot is to have a private FDR.
Yes.
So a private an FDR, or financial dispute resolution, is kind of like a negotiation within the court process to try and settle the financial aspects. So because there's all these delays in the court, the judges are encouraging the parties to have a private FDR. That means that
Yeah.
you've got one judge at your beck and call for the whole day to try and sort things out. And invariably you will get one person who will say, well, no, I can't afford it, when they can. If they want a private FDR, they can pay for it.
Yeah.
So that's a way of delaying as well,
Yeah.
because it means that potentially you might have to wait 6 months, 9 months before your case is back in front of
Yeah.
a judge.
Yeah.
And that's why maybe a divorce that on paper should have been concluded in 26, maybe 30 weeks, takes 2, 3, 4 years, because one party is delaying matters.
Yeah.
Then you've got sometimes the delay with the court, just getting a
Yeah.
court date. And then if they don't comply, and you're going back and forth. And then that is why divorces can take a long time, and
Yeah.
unfortunately costly as well.
Absolutely. It goes hand in hand.
Yeah,
Interestingly, there's some countries who do have a fast track divorce. I know Scotland does. When there's no children involved,
yeah.
there is a faster process. But
Mhm.
that's not something that exists in England. Do you know if it's something that has ever been contemplated in England?
Well, I think that, as far as aware, no, not yet.
Okay.
But the probably that's a question for the Law Commission. I mean, the fact
Yes.
that it took as long as it did to have the no fault divorce,
Yes.
um, I
Reform
think
is slow.
yeah, the reform is slow, but I see that as something that has to be addressed, because I
Mhm.
think that certainly if there are no children,
Yeah.
and certainly I've just come to it's just been brought to my I've just remembered, is
Hmm.
that where they're kind of piloting that if your assets are below a certain value,
Yes.
you can bypass some of the processes in terms of the financial aspects of your
Yes. In the Form
divorce.
A, it
Yes,
actually asks you
yes.
to confirm if you're under 250K.
Yes.
Mm.
So in that respect, a divorce can potentially be fast tracked as such, because you don't need to go through the first appointment, FDR, and final hearing. You can proceed straight to the FDR, and if everything's settled, potentially you could get divorced within the 26 weeks, maybe
Yes.
just a little bit. So I suppose we've started along that road,
Yeah.
but I think there's still more that the government can do to
Yeah.
speed up the process, especially when, as I said, if there's no children involved,
Yes.
and the asset situation is very simple. It's not a complex asset and small money case.
Yeah. Absolutely. So definitely there's opportunities for reform, and in any way the system is continuously improving. But
Yeah.
for our listeners, what can they do? What would be your tips in order to try and speed things up? The 26 weeks are just not going anywhere. Those are there. But to really maximize that timeline, what can people do to try and make their divorce as quick and painless as possible?
Well, I'm a big advocate of non-contentious dispute resolution,
Hmm.
where that be mediation, arbitration. a new process was introduced by resolution, which
Hmm.
is the solicitors family. They used to be called the solicitors family law resolution. Is the one couple, one
Yes.
solicitor. So that is a way of speeding things up because
Yeah.
if you both have individual solicitors, that's fine. But
Hmm.
you've got to write to one solicitor, they've got to speak to their client, then write back to you, and then you speak to your client. But if you have one solicitor acting for both, and there are certain circumstances where it's not appropriate,
Yes.
then that is a way of speeding the process up, and having an agreement ready that by the time you can apply for the conditional order and it comes through, you can put in your financial order, and then about 6 to 8 weeks later your divorce and your
Yeah.
financial matter is concluded. um I think also it's about, I think sometimes, and I know it's hard because emotions get involved, um but using people like you, Chloe,
Hmm.
to help them navigate their emotions, anger towards their spouse, and actually using their solicitor for dealing with the legal aspects. Because
Hmm.
sometimes, as lawyers, we spend a lot of time navigating clients' feelings or the
Yes.
animosity that they have towards their soon to be ex spouse. But I always say to clients that, if they can use other professionals to help them through the emotional quagmire of getting divorced, that helps to speed things up.
Yeah.
um and sometimes people get letters and they get really frightened or anxious about it, but again, having a divorce coach or somebody who can help them, right, let's go through it, what actually is that being said? Well, no, it's not, they're not saying this is what they're actually saying. Again, it's helping to process their emotions, which would allow their divorce to go through quicker.
Yeah. Because then they're able to make those decisions and have those negotiations.
Yes,
So,
yes,
so the underlying message really that I'm hearing from you is collaboration, whether it's sharing a lawyer, mediation, whatever NCDR option they choose. The fastest way of resolving your disputes is if you can come to an agreement together, because as soon as you
yes,
dip into the court system, that's when you start experiencing long delays between hearings and it makes everything a lot more complicated.
absolutely. Yes. I mean, if we always take the view at Gilson Gray, the family team at Gilson Gray, is we try to avoid formal court
Hmm.
proceedings. I mean, the issuing the divorce application is formal court proceedings, but if we can
Yes.
resolve like the finances, children, without having to go to court, that means that it minimizes
Oh, Linda, I've lost you.
and minimizes hostility.
Oh,
Um, oh,
sorry. Can
oh,
you start
sorry.
again from if you can avoid the court process? I don't know why it cut
Yeah,
off.
okay. So we very much advocate avoiding formal court proceedings if you can. Of course, to dissolve the marriage or your civil partnership, you have to issue formal court proceedings, and that's
Yeah.
always like an administrative process.
Hmm.
But if you can avoid going to court with regard to dividing the matrimonial assets and resolving issues regarding your children, that is always the preferred option, because
Yeah.
there are long delays in the family court, and that's what makes divorce um, getting divorced much more difficult and a longer process.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Linda. A lot of very helpful tips. I wanted to add one, which hopefully you agree with, which is more of a, I guess, a strategic one. And you hinted at it earlier. The filing process. I see a lot of couples who negotiate their agreements and then file. And that means that the 26 weeks kick off later.
Yes,
If you really want to optimize the timeline, ideally you file at the start, use those 26 weeks to negotiate, and then if you're lucky and it all lines up wonderfully, you can finalize a divorce at that stage. But using those 20 weeks to negotiate is a really good way of making the most of that waiting period.
absolutely. Absolutely. And that's part of what the 20-week waiting period is for, to
Yeah,
resolve all these issues that ideally by the time you get to the stage where you can apply for the conditional order and you can apply for the final order, everything's done.
exactly. Brilliant. Well, so many useful tips, Linda. Thank you very much. I'm going to put your email address in the episode notes. So if anybody wants to reach out to you, needs support through this process, they can reach you easily. But we've got a lot of really helpful information. So thank you so much for sharing all of this with us.
Well, thank you very much, Chloe. Thank you.
Take care.